Hello everybody, it's Bridget Plass here, without Adrian, which I know some of you will have seen on the website that he's been very poorly. And I'm just going to start backwards really, because last week we were talking about how we yearn for reality to be as real as wood. Well, I had a conversation with Adrian at 12:30 last night where he was awake in hospital and he was eating toast and he was drinking tea, and he said, "This feels real. I feel as though I'm alive." And the other thing, and anyone who's been in hospital will know that in the world of bedpans and people washing you, what an amazing moment it is when they bring you a bowl of nice hot water and your flannel and your soap, and you sit there and your hands in hot water and you think, I feel alive again. So those are moments of reality that have felt as real as wood for Adrian in the last couple of days. I don't want to go on and on about what has happened to him. He wasn't very well last week, and he went to the doctor, ECG and blood pressure and that sort of thing. But actually over the weekend he really did get very, very poorly, which culminated on Saturday night with him having a fall and just not being able to make his brain work really, to move any of his limbs or himself at all, or understand instructions. So we got the paramedics who took him to A&E, and there they did a scan, and they discovered there was what they described as an extensive bleed on the brain. And that involved obviously an emergency dash by ambulance and an emergency op. And I came home on my own because, of course, you can't visit at the moment. So I couldn't go in the ambulance with him, and I came home feeling desperately afraid, as you can imagine. I don't know whether you can also imagine how I felt when the next morning I phoned the ward, and the ward sister said, "Oh, he's sitting up eating his breakfast. Would you like to have a word with him?" That was one of those real resurrection moments in my life. And I did have a word with him, and I've had a lot of words since, and he really is doing very, very well. He gets tired in the afternoon, but essentially things are going really well. And the really good news for me was yesterday when he said he'd walked with the physio, which meant that his brain was speaking to his legs. That was a very, very, very good moment. So we are feeling positive. I think we're both, and all of our family actually, feeling very emotional. It's been, as I know many of you will know, when you've been through these really strange times, how frightening it is and all the rest of it, and how the emotions sometimes come afterwards. But one of the things that really struck me as odd was that Adrian has no memories at all of Saturday night or Sunday. So he wakes in recovery to find himself full of tubes and all the other things that you're full of when you've just had an operation, and a load of strangers standing around him, and he has absolutely no idea how he got there. So it's been a strange time for him, but he sends his love, and he's determined that he's going to be up and running, and well, maybe not running actually. Well, he wasn't running before, not really running, so but you know what I mean, and able to share stories and laugh about things and think about things again. This, the reality was certainly one of the things that some people did email about, this idea of those moments when your faith is as real as wood. There is nothing artificial about it. And somebody said, and I thought this was really interesting, it hasn't actually given them words to say, to share their faith. They still struggle with that, but it's given them a confidence that even if people don't understand, they know deep down a reality. I really like that. You know, somebody said they've given me the ability to speak with confidence when the moment seems right. Yeah, I thought that was lovely. Somebody else was saying that they also worry sometimes, have they been gullible? And that's certainly something I think we've sometimes felt. Are we just a group of gullible people who believe in fairy tales? And she says, then we tell ourselves that we know, I don't know how, that Jesus is for real. And if we want reality, we have to stick with him. Everyday reality is one thing, but there's more to every day. isn't there? And again, I think I found that really, really helpful over this last week, or it's not even a week, over this last few days of a very traumatic time in our family, that there is a reality, there is something deep down that isn't going to be very strong when put into words always, unless you've got great gift in that area. But it's there. And certainly I never felt alone during this time, even though I was very frightened. And this person was going on to say it's more than the Bible. The Bible is part of it, but not the whole thing. And if you say just look at Corinthians 2 verse 73, or it says in the Bible that, it's all very useful, but it isn't the same as a reality like wood. So that's one thing that's become rather important to us. We say these things and then it's as though God says, well, let's just see what you feel after a few days. But the other area we were talking about last week, was, we were thinking about the tragedy in the Channel. And we were thinking about the fact that it can become a political tool for one side to say to another, even in a democratic country, it's all your fault, the policy is your fault, that all between countries you're getting it wrong, you know you're getting it wrong, no, you're more wrong than I'm wrong. It becomes a childish fight, and in the middle are real people, so desperate that they'll risk anything, so desperate that even though they know they're being taken advantage of by smugglers, they put themselves through it. And I was interested in one or two responses to that. One person said that they were quite questioning their feelings about the kids and adults who were killed because someone has exploited their vulnerability and been paid to put them in an insecure boat into an awful stretch of water. There's no politics here, I just feel at a loss. And in a way, it's all right to feel at a loss, isn't it? These are huge things. I mean, I know one or two people listen to us in Australia and various other places, and they probably don't know what the Channel is like between Dover and France. I can tell you, because I have been on the ferry many times, and the ferry is perfectly secure and fine, and you can get food and a cup of tea and walk around on deck. If the weather is bad, it is very hard to stay on your feet. It's very hard not to be sick. And in fact, I know many people who, because we used to live in Sussex and we went across to, actually from Newhaven to Dieppe was our route, a 4-hour journey. The worst moment was when you went onto the boat and you saw on every table a sick bag and your heart sank and you knew that you might spend some of the journey hugging the toilet. Well, that's us. That's normal, comfortable people paying to travel by a totally secure ferry. Yeah, it's a big thing, isn't it? You know, somebody was saying in an email that it reminded them when we were talking about the importance of each individual of something Adrian wrote years ago about something that happened to him when he was a boy. Now, I know some of you will know this story, but it's more than a story. It's real as wood. And I thought, as he isn't here, I'll try and remember it. I may not remember it exactly. But I know Adrian, as a little boy, was a huge reader. His brothers were as well. They had a house full of books, and they were indiscriminate books, if you know what I mean. They didn't have the number of words suitable for 7 to 8-year-olds. They were just books, and there were lots of them. And he used to read anything he could get his hands on. And one time, and now I'm afraid I can't tell you where this came from, but he read the phrase, "Everybody is I." What does that mean? And he says he was on the bus, and he was at the front of the bus, and he was holding on to the front of the bus, pretending to drive the bus. Now, those of you who are younger won't know the experience of sitting at the front of the top of the bus and pretending to drive the bus, but I know that feeling, and he knows that feeling and knew it when he was a little boy. You kind of pretend to steer it and stop it and all the rest of it. So he was sitting up there looking out the window and thinking about these words, "Everybody is I." And in front of him, the bus slowed down because a very elderly lady, who'd obviously had some sort of a stroke, was struggling across the road. And he thought of that phrase, "Everybody is I," And he thought, that person is the most important person in the world, in her world. She is at the centre of her world. She is trying to get from A to B in her world. She has things to do, people to see and all the rest of it. I'm not sure if he's actually said that, but that impact on him was quite incredible. Everybody is I. And I think that's why, for both of us actually, so much of the ministry of Jesus means so much, because each person he met, whether it was somebody he had to get very angry with, somebody he needed to rescue, somebody he needed to encourage, the person in front of him became the centre of his world for a little while. You know, it's been interesting for Adrian to be the centre of the world of the high dependency unit, surrounded by experts who know how each little bit of him ought to be working in their hands. No more able to make his own life work than this little lady staggering across the road. But in this little while he's been in the HDU, he has been the centre of their universe, helping him to get better. It's quite a responsibility, isn't it? I mean, it's a job, but it's more than a job, as we know, for people working in intensive care. But it's also a job for us, isn't it? And an impossible job, really, to look at each person we meet and think, how can I enable them to feel and to be and to function in the centre of their world to the very best of who they are? I don't think that's a sentence, but I kind of know what I mean about that. Yeah. I don't know. I think increasingly I find myself losing so much of the stuff that seemed important. But then I was thinking, just the other night, sitting here on my own, and one of the most difficult moments, of course, was walking back into the house, having said goodbye to Adrian in the ambulance, knowing I couldn't visit him because you're not allowed to go into the ward with the possibility of COVID. And there was all the paraphernalia around that we'd used to try to get him on his feet, in order to get him down the stairs, in order to get him into the ambulance, in order to get him wherever he had to go. Was it still relevant? I picked cushions up. I picked a little table up we'd hoped would be able to help him move his hands. And I thought of all the people who go through that. And I know a lot of people who've lost the person they loved the most in the world and have an emptiness in them because of that. And I don't know, it just made me realise all over again that everybody is I, that so many people go through so many things. And I want him back, not just physically, because I do, but I want him back because of his words, and because of the things he says, and because of the way his mind works. And you know, last week, and I'm going to finish in a minute, this isn't going to be a long recording, as it's only me, but you know, last week I very badly read some stuff from Anne Lamott. The truth is, we were sitting on the sofa with Adrian not feeling at all well, and with a light we don't usually use, which wasn't strong enough for me to read, so the whole thing was a shambles, really. But we do, as I said before, we do like Anne Lamott, and I think a lot of the reason I do is that Adrian and she are not dissimilar, although she's tiny and dreadlocked and very alternative in her lifestyle, and I don't think Adrian quite fits that picture. But they, I think, both give us as human beings and as Christians permission to laugh and to cry and to question. So I'm just going to finish with a couple of her quotes. One of them is, "Rest and laughter are the most spiritual and subversive acts of all. Laugh, rest, slow down." And I thought Adrian could have said that many, many times. We have reflected on the fact that, that laughter is a very important part of spiritual ministry. It's not the poor relation of Christian ministry. Giving people to cry, to mourn with those who mourn, is a pretty strong directive from Jesus. Slow down. one of the things that Adrian and I have admired the more we've looked at the life of Jesus is the way he slowed down and stopped when necessary. So he spent 3 days with the woman at the well. He didn't just tell her what she needed to hear and then go. And I know we've talked about it before, but with the woman who, we always call it, had an issue of blood. Poor woman. And he didn't just heal her. He called her out in front of everybody. And he said, look, she's clean. She can go to the temple. He finished the job, however long it took. And I know Paul spent ages in some places on his ministry, zoomed through other places, but sometimes stopped for months and even years. And the other quote, and I'm going to finish with this, I really like, and I think this applies to Adrian, is almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. And Adrian's been unplugged from his computer, unplugged from us at home, unplugged from 1,000 things going on in his mind, unplugged from writing or reading or anything else. And maybe, just maybe, everything will work again really well, simply because he's had to stop for a little while. So he sends his blessings and his smile and his love to you, and says as soon as he possibly is able, we'll be back to talking to you again. So we look forward, or I look forward, or whatever it's going to be, to talking to you next week. So God bless, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.